I was reheating leftover chili when the email hit. Subject line: exciting changes ahead. That's how they do it now. Euphemisms soaked in corporate cologne. But I knew the stench underneath. My phone buzzed 3 seconds later. Calendar invite. Zoom, org restructure overview. No context, just 15 minutes of dread wrapped in bullet points and buzzwords. By the time I clicked in, the screen was already gridlocked with faces pretending not to be tense. And then there he was, Bob, our gray-haired CEO, with all the empathy of a parking ticket, grinning like he just solved climate change. "We're thrilled to introduce a fresh vision," he said, his voice slick as WD-40. "Meet Chad, my nephew. Harvard MBA, minor in disruption, major in energy." Chad popped on camera with a backwards baseball cap and a smug little wave like we were all gathered for his bar mitzvah. "I'm just excited to modernize our ops and lean into next-gen synergies," he said. "I swear to God, if bullshit were an Olympic sport, this kid would podium." "And with that," Bob continued, not even blinking, "we're sunsetting a few legacy roles, including our long-serving director of operations. Thank you, Elaine. Truly." That was it. No meeting. No warning. No one-on-one. Just public execution via slideshow. Before I continue, real quick, 97% of people listening to stories like this never hit subscribe. If you're into quiet revenge, forgotten contracts, or watching frat boys implode, hit like and subscribe. It means the world to our team and helps stories like mine actually reach people who need to hear them. Now back to my chili. It burned. I didn't care. I just stared at the Zoom for a few more seconds. No one spoke. A few awkward smiles. One VP blinked like she wanted to say something and then didn't. Chad winked at the screen. That's when I clicked leave meeting. Walked straight to the attic. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just climbed the creaky stairs, shoved aside a plastic bin of Christmas crap, and pulled out an old banker's box I hadn't touched in almost a decade. A layer of dust so thick it looked like powdered sugar. I cracked it open. Inside, contracts. Original copies. Hand-signed. One manila folder was labeled in my handwriting. Tanner Supply Line Agreement. Personal guarantee. See, when the company was tanking 10 years ago, when the banks ghosted us, when our packaging supplier threatened to walk, I put up my own assets. Not hypothetically. Not spiritually. I walked into a meeting with my personal financials, laid them on the table, and said, "I'll guarantee the line. You get your payment. We keep moving." No one asked me to, but no one else had the guts to either. And it worked. We kept the Tanner deal. We kept the shipments flowing. We avoided layoffs. Hell, we didn't just survive, we scaled. Grew. Became one of the leanest ops in the region. They built a company off the back of my risk. And now they were handing the keys to a man-child who thought Net 30 was a TikTok trend. I didn't say a word. Not to HR. Not to Bob. Not to anyone. I just sat in my kitchen, stared at the folder and whispered, "Let's see how far Chad gets without this." 10 years ago, we were 3 days from collapse. Not the dramatic, sirens blaring kind of collapse. The quiet kind. Accounts payable piling up like bodies, phones going unanswered, even the office plants curling in on themselves like they knew the end was near. I was sitting in the break room with 2 other managers, both pretending their wives weren't asking them to polish resumes. Everyone knew the bank had pulled our credit line. We were bleeding out, silently. The packaging supplier, Tanner Industries, was our last artery. If they cut us off, there'd be nothing left but layoffs and locked doors. Bob, yes, the same Bob, was pacing like a wet dog in a thunderstorm. "If we can't get product out by Friday," he muttered to no one in particular, "we're toast." Then he turned to me with those tired CEO eyes, the kind that want someone else to offer the miracle. I didn't offer it then. I waited. That night, I called Tanner's VP of Accounts, Deb Fisher. I'd known her from a trade show back when people still used landlines and cocktail napkins. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Your order backlog is radioactive, Elaine. Our board won't approve another shipment unless there's a cash guarantee or collateral." So I did what Bob never would. I offered mine. Took the deed to the small rental house my mother left me. Paid off. Not fancy but clean. Stable. I remember standing in the bank's notary office thinking, if this backfires, I'll be the idiot who lost a home for a company that still won't reimburse printer ink. But it didn't backfire. We got the shipment. Orders resumed. Clients stayed. And within 18 months, we were back in black. No press release. No bonus. No plaque on the wall. I didn't want it. What I wanted was for people like Mel in fulfillment to keep her shift. For Jake in shipping to buy the minivan he'd been saving for. For the lights to stay on in a company I believed in. The contract with Tanner was simple. Quiet. 1 page. Clause 7 stated, in the event of default by company, the named guarantor assumes direct financial responsibility for balance owed. Clause 9. This agreement is contingent on the active role of guarantor within said company. If said guarantor is removed or terminated, this agreement becomes null pending supplier review. I signed that paper with a big pen at Deb's kitchen table over cheap coffee and a donut. I never told anyone about Clause 9. Bob didn't ask. The board didn't care. As long as the boxes kept moving, they were happy to forget who made the first one ship. But now that they'd kicked me out like last season's inventory, now that a boy with perfect teeth and a 5 o'clock shadow drawn on with eyeliner was steering the ship, well, let's just say I remembered what they forgot. First week on the job, and Chad decided Tanner was old school. That's the word he used in a company-wide Slack message, like we were a damn sorority planning a theme party. Exploring agile vendor alternatives to modernize supply dynamics, he wrote. Which is finance bro speak for. I found a cheaper box factory on Reddit. By the second week, pallets were showing up half-wrapped, some printed with the wrong client logos, others water-damaged before they even left the truck. One of our biggest clients, a skincare brand in Portland, called customer service demanding to know why their organic toner was delivered in boxes labeled fertilizer, Class C. Chat's response? He went on LinkedIn and posted a photo of himself giving a thumbs up in front of a whiteboard with the words, Q4 Lean Optimization, scrawled in Comic Sans. The caption said, making bold moves. Fortune favors the agile. And Fortune's probably still rolling her damn eyes. Meanwhile, he delayed outgoing payments to suppliers, something about protecting cash runway. Didn't bother to tell accounts payable. Just yanked approvals from the system and told everyone not to worry. He'd smooth it out during renegotiations. I found out from Mel, same Mel I'd kept on payroll a decade earlier. She texted me a photo of a warehouse floor with shrink-wrapped inventory just sitting there. No shipping labels. No outgoing orders. She added, no one's answering calls. Tanner hasn't sent a load in over a week. I called Deb. She didn't pick up. That night, I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and stared at the Tanner contract again. I ran my finger over Clause 9 like it was written in Braille. I could feel the arrogance bleeding through the walls. Bob had given the wheel to a guy who thought net terms was a dating app setting. And the only reason the engine still ran was because no one had pulled the plug I was holding. Chad kept holding town halls, each one worse than the last. He talked about exploring synergy with direct-to-pallet vendors, like he'd invented dropshipping. The COO nodded politely. HR smiled like someone just told them to. Legal said nothing. In one meeting, someone finally asked, what's the plan if Tanner doesn't come back online? Chad sipped his smoothie, bright green, like radioactive algae, and grinned. We'll renegotiate everything next quarter. Tanner's not the only game in town. He said that with the confidence of a man who's never missed a car payment, never signed a personal guarantee, never sat across from a supplier's rep, and convinced them to trust a dying company one last time. He didn't know it yet, but every word he spoke was stacking wood on a fire he couldn't see, and I was holding the match. I couldn't sleep. Not because of rage. Those fires had already burned to ash. It was something quieter, heavier. The kind of weight you don't notice until you try to stand up and your knees don't listen. At 3:07 a.m., I gave up pretending and padded into the den with the Tanner folder tucked under my arm like a Bible. I laid the contract out on the coffee table, same one I bought with my first company bonus back when bonuses still meant something. The pages were yellowing slightly, but the ink hadn't faded a bit. Deb always used those archival pens. Just in case this ever goes to hell, she joked. Turns out she wasn't far off. Clause 9 was familiar, but I'd forgotten about Clause 10. Loyalty provision. This agreement shall remain valid only under continuous relationship with the named guarantor. Any termination, resignation, or reassignment of said party shall constitute grounds for contract reevaluation or immediate cancellation by the supplier. I read it twice, then a third time. Not for comprehension, just to feel the shape of the words again. 10 years ago, that clause was a courtesy. Now it was a guillotine, and Bob had just yanked the rope without looking. At 8:12 a.m., I called my lawyer, Margot. No plaisanteries. You still remember the Tanner agreement? I asked. She snorted. The one you had me notarize in a Waffle House? How could I forget? I read her Clause 10. She was quiet for a beat, then said, They cut you loose. That means the contract can be voided at the supplier's discretion. Would it hold? In court? Absolutely. Especially with how you structured it. They used you as the collateral, Elaine, and now they've defaulted. I nodded, even though she couldn't see. Draw up the notice. One sentence. You know the one. She didn't ask for clarification. I stared out the window as a delivery truck rumbled past, logo faded, driver exhausted. I wondered how many people that company employed. How many mortgage payments rode in the back of that truck. How many people would be blamed when the packages stopped arriving, not realizing it all hinged on a decade-old promise tied to one person, one name, one signature. This wasn't vengeance. Vengeance is loud, flashy, petty. This was release. They let go of the hand that held the rope. Now gravity could do the rest. At exactly 10:03 a.m. the following morning, the email was sent. One sentence. No salutation, no sign-off. Just a single line centered in the middle of a PDF with our firm's old logo watermarked behind it like a ghost. The guarantor has been terminated. Act accordingly. It went straight to Natalie Knopf, head of accounts at Tanner Industries. Deb had retired last year. Quietly, like good people tend to do, and Natalie had stepped into her shoes with that same no-nonsense, Middle America backbone that made Tanner the only vendor I ever trusted without an NDA. I knew she'd read it once and understand everything. By 10:28, all Tanner outbound shipments were paused. Every one of them. I didn't find out from corporate. I heard it from Mel again. She texted. No trucks. No calls. Nothing. Chad's freaking out. I didn't reply. By noon, Chad had called 3 emergency huddles, each one dumber than the last. He told logistics it was a routine vendor maintenance hold. Told sales we were restructuring the shipment cadence. Told customer support to proactively overcommunicate. But you can't overcommunicate empty shelves. At 1:14 p.m., legal pinged the COO asking for clarification on the Tanner agreement. That's when it happened. The moment I'd been waiting for without even knowing I was waiting. A message forwarded from legal to ops leadership. Does anyone know who the original guarantor was on the Tanner deal? They didn't even remember. 10 years of stability, of on-time pallets, of negotiated freight freezes, of rush orders accommodated without penalties. And they didn't even know whose name made it all possible. The COO flagged finance. Finance asked HR. HR kicked it to contracts. And somewhere in that bureaucratic game of hot potato, someone finally dug up the PDF with my signature on it. Elaine M. Whitaker. Sole Guarantor. Effective July 14, 2015. I imagine someone printed it out. Sat there staring at it like it was a relic from another world. Maybe even turned it over like they expected more answers on the back. Chad, I'm sure, saw it last. Probably while sipping one of those Matchow atrocities he always carried around. Still riding the delusion that he could charm his way through a supply chain implosion. They would have felt panic. Scrambled for backup plans. Called Tanner. Emailed. Begged for grace. But Tanner doesn't do panic. Tanner does contracts. And the contract was clear. If I go, the deal goes with me. I sat in my kitchen with my laptop open, watching the chaos build from afar like thunder over someone else's house. The email thread from Margot's office blinked with new replies. Questions, read receipts, confirmation notices. I didn't open them. I just right-clicked the thread and hit delete. Then I shut the laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and watered the plants on my windowsill. Because storms like this don't need a conductor. They just need silence. By Friday morning, the shelves were empty. Not low empty. You could hear your own footsteps echo off pallet racks that used to groan under the weight of product. Forklifts sat idle, batteries unplugged. Operators leaning against walls with crossed arms and clenched jaws. Shipping labels curled uselessly on printers still blinking from unprocessed jobs. The first client call came at 9:17 a.m. A longtime beauty subscription service we'd supported for 6 years. Our fulfillment center just pinged, their logistics coordinator said, voice clipped. We were supposed to receive 3 skids of inventory 2 days ago. We've got customers waiting on boxes that don't exist. Customer support escalated. Sales pinged ops. Ops pinged Chad. Chad, in his usual brilliance, tried to calm the team with a Slack message that read, "Temporary logistics turbulence. Let's remain agile and proactive in our outreach." Turbulence. Like he was the damn pilot of a discount airline, telling everyone to enjoy the view while the wings fell off. By 10 a.m., 4 more clients had reached out. By noon, it was double digits. Mel told me the warehouse staff stopped clocking tasks and just stood by the loading dock waiting for trucks that would never come. She said someone actually carved "Here lies Chad's forecast" into the side of a crate. Chad tried calling Tanner. Once. Natalie didn't pick up. She didn't need to. The contract had spoken already. The clause didn't require debate, extension, or explanation. I wasn't there, so neither was the deal. The CEO finally emerged from whatever mahogany cave he lives in and stormed into a leadership call. I wasn't on it, obviously, but I got a play-by-play from an old contact in accounts who still owed me a favor. She said Bob started the call calm, too calm, and asked for a clear operational summary. Chad started spewing buzzwords. Unexpected vendor fatigue, supply velocity drag, seasonal recalibration. Bob interrupted with, "Where are the shipments?" Chad stammered, then pointed fingers at third-party logistics, the weather, even an imagined cyber attack. Anything but the real reason. That's when one of the senior directors, the kind that survived 4 layoffs and stopped suffering fools a decade ago, finally said it out loud. "It's the clause." Silence. She went on. "The Tanner deal wasn't backed by the company. It was personally guaranteed. That guarantee is gone. They're not shipping because they legally don't have to." Bob asked flatly, "Who was the guarantor?" Another beat of silence. Then, Elaine Whitaker. I imagine Bob rubbing his temples, maybe closing his eyes, maybe muttering something like, "Jesus Christ." They started calling it the nuclear clause. Ironic, given how hard they'd worked to make me invisible. And now every word I once signed was detonating under their feet. I didn't gloat, didn't pop champagne, didn't even smile. I just folded laundry in silence while the company that once couldn't run without me finally proved it, by not running at all. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 7 a.m. sharp, because panic wakes early, especially when half your Q4 revenue is rotting in unsold boxes. Board members flew in. Legal printed every contract with a clause bolded in red. Chad showed up in a wrinkled blazer, circles under his eyes, holding a smoothie like it was a life raft. They'd already tried email, then texts, then voicemails. Tanner hadn't responded to a single word. So Chad, in a last-ditch bid for control, tried the oldest trick in his finance bro bag, a bluff. He had Natalie from Tanner patched in over speaker. "Let's be real here," Chad began, attempting charm. "You guys have been with us for a decade. We've had a few hiccups. Totally normal in this environment. Let's hit reset. Clean slate. You send the shipments, and we'll reevaluate the terms next cycle." Natalie was quiet for a moment. Then she said it, slow, measured, like someone setting down a knife. "You're not our client anymore." The air went still. Chad blinked. "Sorry, what?" "You were never our client," she clarified. "Elaine Whitaker was. The contract named her, not your company. You removed her. The agreement is now void. We've acted accordingly." Someone on the board swore under their breath. The CFO leaned forward, asking if there was any flexibility. Natalie didn't budge. If Ms. Whitaker starts something new, we'll talk, she said. Otherwise, we're moving on. She hung up. Bob turned to legal, his voice tight. Is that legally enforceable? The general counsel, usually composed to the point of boredom, nodded once. It's airtight. The personal guarantee was the foundation. Without her, the contract was never with us, it was with her. The room unraveled. Directors whispered. One VP muttered something about fiduciary oversight. Someone else asked why no one had flagged this during transition planning. Legal offered a hollow shrug. It was filed as legacy support. No one reviewed it. And then Bob asked the question, can we reinstate her? Dead silence. No one offered to make the call. No one volunteered to find my number. They all just sat there. A circle of expensive suits, realizing they'd gutted their own infrastructure and replaced it with a LinkedIn profile picture in loafers. Meanwhile, I sat in my garden, watching the wind shift through the rosemary. My phone buzzed twice. Unfamiliar numbers. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. The storm was already overhead. And I wasn't under it anymore. This wasn't revenge. This was weather. 3 days after the boardroom crumbled, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter. Heavy cream paper. Tanner Industries letterhead in embossed navy. Inside, one sentence handwritten by Natalie herself. We only stayed that long because of you. If you start something new, we'll follow. No drama. No sales pitch. Just a message carved in ink and loyalty. I held it for a long time, just staring. Not because I needed convincing, but because after everything, the silence, the erasure, the polished smiles as they slid the knife in, it felt clean. Honest. Like the moment after a long storm when you finally crack the window and realize the air smells like beginnings again. I didn't call Bob. Didn't reply to the 3 voicemails legal had left. Didn't dignify the COO's urgent inquiry with anything but a silent swipe left. Instead, I texted Paul. Paul had been my logistics lead for 8 years before Chad restructured him into irrelevance. Smart, exacting, unshakable under pressure. He replied within 5 minutes. You starting something? Yeah, I typed. You in? Hell yes. By the end of the week, we were standing in a small, square office above a bakery in the old district. No exposed brick, no kombucha on tap, no glass walls or buzzwords. Just clean lines, solid desks, and the kind of peace you only get when no one's trying to sell you a ping-pong table as company culture. We didn't need 100 staffers. We needed 5 sharp ones. We didn't need 6 layers of approval. We needed trust and the speed to act. We didn't need funding rounds. We needed fulfillment. I looked around, boxes still half opened, the air smelling faintly of fresh paint and espresso from the shop downstairs. Paul was setting up a whiteboard with markers he brought from home. Across the street, a delivery truck idled, back doors wide open, a driver checking his clipboard. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't loud. But it was ours. I turned to Paul, tapped the corner of Tanner's letter still folded in my pocket, and said, let's do this leaner, smarter, and with people who remember who built what. He grinned and tossed me a set of keys. Name's already on the lease, he said. I smiled. They called me legacy. They called me redundant. But this was new. This was sharp. And they wouldn't see it coming. Bob got the letter on a Monday. The kind of Monday where half your client calls go straight to voicemail because there's nothing left to promise, and your CFO is 3 coffees deep into an ulcer. The envelope came by courier, hand-delivered, signed for. Tanner Industries didn't do digital for moments like this. No, this kind of reckoning came on thick paper and silence. Inside 2 pages. The first, a formal notice from Tanner, terminating all supplier relations with Bob's company, effective immediately. The second, a scanned image of the original personal guarantee contract, signed in black ink. My name. My handwriting. The same document they never bothered to read beyond the price tag. At the bottom of Tanner's letter, one final line. You terminated the contract. We're following suit. I wasn't there when Bob opened it, but I like to think he read it twice. Maybe 3 times. Maybe he finally remembered that day 10 years ago when I walked into his office, put down the paperwork, and said, "It's handled." No fanfare. No bragging. Just the quiet kind of leadership they've never been able to replace, because they never even recognized it. No more Tanner meant no more product. No more product meant no more revenue. No more revenue meant no more bonuses, no more bored patients, no more Chad. I assumed the spiral happened fast. It always does when you build an empire on someone else's back, and then kick that foundation out for being old school. While Bob sat in his corner office surrounded by attorneys and emergency consultants, I was walking through mine. It was smaller. No carpeted halls or mahogany conference tables. Just clean floors, fresh inventory, and people who showed up early without being asked. Paul had music playing in the background, some easy jazz over warehouse hum. I passed by our new inventory manager, a single mom I hired from a logistics outfit that folded last winter. She smiled when she saw me. That smile meant more than a dozen company-wide thank you emails ever did. Our first shipment had left the dock that morning. Tanner delivered it personally. Natalie even texted to say, "Looks good on your end. You're real again." I paused by the front window, watching a pair of couriers load our branded boxes onto a truck. Crisp, sharp, unmissable. This place didn't need rescuing. It needed remembering. And as I stood there, I could hear it. The sound of something new being built, not because someone asked, but because someone knew how. Voiceover. For 10 years, I held them up with both hands. When they let go, so did I.